Yo guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the video. And today I wanted to talk about the post that went up on the Wuthering Waves website. I think it went up today, yeah, it went up today. And talking about the negative status effects in Wuthering Waves, which we've already got one right now with Spectro Frazzle. We've got more coming. And I wanted to talk about it because I think it's interesting. We're going into like this second phase, the Gen 2, if you will, in Wuthering Waves, aren't we, in regards to Sonata sets and these negative statuses that are being added to the game. I spoke about this like months ago, actually, saying that it'd be really cool if the game had afflictions. That's what I was calling them back then, where particular sets that were coming out or characters in the future could apply afflictions, basically, status effects to enemies, and it could kind of like change the way the game's played, lean into attributes a little bit more than crit rate, crit damage, and just change on-field time for characters and just different ways to play the game. And it's interesting that they're kind of doing something like this. Not quite what I was thinking, but something interesting nonetheless. So let's get into it. We already kind of know the deal anyway a little bit because we've all saw Spectro Frazzle. We've saw what it could do. But let's read what they've got to say here. And we are actually going to go through some of the other attribute negative status effects as well that are being added into the game, which I think is really interesting. So let's get into this then, shall we? So certain attribute attacks can inflict negative status on the target, granting various buffs and adding depth to the combat. All right then, negative status special mechanics explain. During battle, certain attribute attacks inflict negative status on the target. Negative status comes in 6 types, each carrying different effects. Take the Resonator Phoebe in version 2.1 as an example. She can utilize the Spectral Frazzle effect for strategic advantage in battle. Let's examine how Spectral Frazzle effect works. One thing that'll be really interesting as well is how they apply these status effects to different characters to really switch things up to add those levels. You know, and how you're going to use characters together with negative status effects as well. So obviously we've got Spectral Frazzle effect. Certain Spectro attacks inflict a stackable Spectral Frazzle effect. Spectral Frazzle effect deals spectral damage to the target at regular intervals during its duration while reducing 1 stack of Spectral Frazzle effect, which we know it's pretty much dot damage, right? The damage inflicted by the Spectral Frazzle effect depends on the Resonator's level, the enemy's defense and damage resistance, and the number of Spectral Frazzle effect stacks. It is not influenced by the Resonator's attack, crit rate, and other factors, sorry. So this is really interesting for me, and something the game needs as well, because we really lean heavily into crit rate and crit damage in this game, don't we? So the fact that this is trying to pull us away from that a little bit and add an extra layer to the whole system, for me, is very much a good thing, in my opinion. I'm happy this is happening. Obviously, we've already saw Spectral Frazzle, and we kind of saw the fusion version of it, didn't we, in the pincer maneuver, the last pincer maneuver, I think it was, or the one before it. I can't remember anyway now. So, inflict negative status on enemies. We know the Rover Spectro 1 perform enhanced resonance skill with when Rover Spectro was more than 50% diminutive sound to inflict 2 stacks of Spectral Frazzle effect and shimmer on the target. Targets affected by shimmer retain their Spectral Frazzle effect stacks, which we know. Even though the effect normally decreases stacks upon dealing damage, Resonance Liberation applies 6 stacks of Spectral Frazzle effect to all targets in range. Obviously, we know the special mechanic in the Spectral Rover is obviously the shimmer mechanic, which obviously, it'll be interesting to see how other characters apply and maybe even potentially maintain or just use it in different ways in the future, actually. So let's have a look at Phoebe's confession then, shall we? In a confession status, she's adept at inflicting Spectral Frazzle effect on enemies. Heavy attack Starflash applies 5 stacks of Spectral Frazzle effect to the target. Upon entering the confession status, Phoebe can immediately perform heavy attack Starflash twice, Resonance Liberation inflicts 8 stacks of Spectral Frazzle effect on the target, which is kind of insane. So if multiple Resonators apply Spectral Frazzle effect to the same target, its base damage is determined by the highest level Resonator. So how is that working then when you've got 2 characters at the same level? If it's not going off attack, crit rate, or other factors, what's going to be the determining factor of who's you know, the damage is determined by which Resonator? Then I'll be interested to see. I wonder, will it be going off, will it default to attack then, or the actual spectral damage numbers? I'm not too sure. Probably will go off the spectral numbers, right? Okay. Utilize negative status for more buffs. In addition to the inherent effects of negative status, some Resonators receive extra bonuses when battling foes with negative status. Phoebe and her absolution status. Phoebe and her absolution status gains increased combat strength against enemies with Spectro frazzle effect. Heavy attack star flash benefits from an enhanced damage multiplier, and her absolution status, she can perform it 4 times. The outro skill also boasts an enhanced damage multiplier. So actually, this is kind of similar to what I spoke about before when I was talking about afflictions. I was saying that, like, I don't know, let's say you're running a Havoc character with another Havoc character, whatever, it doesn't matter the attribute, and you inflict the affliction, or you afflict the affliction or the negative status or the status onto a character, that then bringing in another character that uses the same attribute, it would like stack the damage. It's kind of a similar sort of system here. Not quite exactly the same, and it's probably going to work very differently with different characters, but it's kind of something in that realm. So that's interesting to see. I remember when I spoke about this originally, people were saying I was crazy. Wuthering Waves doesn't need those sort of things, and I'm not saying it needs it, but I definitely do think the game will benefit from this like extra layer, this little bit more nuance to the way the combat works. And, you know, I'm not saying it's going to pull us away from the crit rate, crit damage system in the game, but it's just something extra to look at when you're building out your teams and deciding what you're going to be doing in combat, isn't it? It's definitely an extra nuance in the game. Negative status effects can be enhanced by certain weapons, sonata effects, and echo skills. Choose your tactics wisely by selecting weapons and echoes that boost your combat effectiveness. So I guess maybe that's what the deal is then, yeah. So it'll be determined by a person who's got a specific sonata effect, a weapon, or echo skills there. So like if somebody's rolling echo sets that you've got in hand, you've got your spectral damage on them, you know, compared to somebody else who might have just crit rate, attack, and whatever. That'll be the character's baseline damage that gets used, basically. So obviously attack, crit rate, all that sort of stuff's going to be ignored, but potentially your weapon sonata sets and your echoes are going to be the determining factor of which character's numbers get used, I guess. I'm assuming that anyway. Okay, this is what we're here for, the other negative effects, because obviously we know about Spectral Frazzle, don't we? Let's see what we've got about the other attributes then. So we've got Aero Erosion. Certain aero attacks will inflict stackable aero erosion on enemies. Aero erosion inflicts aero damage on the target at regular intervals as long as it lasts, with more stacks resulting in greater damage. Okay, let me just read that again. Aero erosion inflicts aero damage on the target at regular intervals. So it's another dot then, basically, with more stacks resulting in greater damage. So you want to stack up as much as possible to increase the dot over time. Okay, all right. So then we've got Havoc Bane. Certain Havoc attacks will inflict Havoc Bane on enemies. Havoc Bane accumulates stacks automatically, okay, while it remains active. Once it reaches its maximum stacks, it deals Havoc damage to the target, removes Havoc Bane, and applies Havoc Bane to nearby characters. Interesting. Okay, so that's actually just going to build up and then do like kind of like, I guess, like a burst damage onto the enemies. So you're not going to be doing dot over that. You're just going to be stacking up the stacks to then unleash those stacks onto the enemies and then applying Havoc Bane to nearby characters as well. Interesting. Okay, so it's a little bit of a different situation with Havoc there. That's I like the idea of that, actually. You know, it's going to be, I guess, a little bit more expensive in a sense that you're not getting it continually, but it's going to build up to probably do, you know, a big hit in one go, which is kind of cool, actually. Fusion Burst. Certain fusion attacks will inflict stackable fusion bursts on enemies. Once fusion burst hits its max stacks, it ignites and removes those stacks, dealing fusion damage. Interesting. So that makes sense for fusion, doesn't it? For it to ignite, so it ignites and removes those stacks, dealing fusion damage. I wonder if this will act a bit like an AoE then. You know, that it's going to ignite and maybe, you know, apply a burn to a certain area on the ground. So I'll be interested to see that. I'm really curious to see what Fusion Burst does then, if it is going to be like an AoE attack once it's hit its max stacks and ignites. And then we've got Glacial Chafe. Certain Glacial attacks will inflict stackable Glacial Chafe on enemies. As Glacial Chafe stacks increase, the target's speed gradually decreases. Upon reaching max stacks, the target is frozen and the stacks of Glacial Chafe are removed. This sounds awesome. This is exactly what I was saying when I was talking about afflictions before, what Glacial could do, that you could literally slow and freeze enemies. You could maybe slow bigger enemies and freeze smaller adds and stuff like that. So that's pretty much kind of like what I thought Glacial would be good for. This is great to see. This is definitely great. Like I say, it's adding that extra level of nuance to the combat, isn't it? Which I've really liked this. I've really, really liked this. Is a big W, this is. Again, Kuro just taking things to the next level, you know? It'll be interesting to see how this is going to work with resonators. Obviously, new resonators are going to be able to benefit, I would imagine, the best from it. You know, you're going to be able to do it through sonata sets, echoes and stuff in the future as well. But, you know, characters coming out with it built inherently into the kit and being able to take advantage of it from the kit will be interesting as well. I wonder how older characters are going to be able to benefit from this as well. Be really interesting to see what the deal is with that, actually, because could that create a bit of a divide between the characters and we actually start to see some real power creep then if it's applied, you know, more so for newer characters? Electro Flare. Certain electro attacks will inflict stackable electro flare on enemies. While electro flare is active, it weakens the target's attack with more stacks, further reducing their strength. Interesting. Okay, so this one's actually like a proper debuff then. Cool. That's actually kind of cool, to be fair. Okay, so we've got a debuff in regards to a slow and a freeze. We've got a debuff in reducing enemies' attack. We've got one that kind of sounds like, to me, an AoE once it's stacked. Then we've got another one that stacks and is basically going to do a big burst damage. And then we've got another one that seems kind of a little bit like Spectro frazzle, where it's going to basically be a dot damage over time. And as you get more stacks, it obviously does more damage. So this is really cool, actually. I must admit, I'm very much interested in this. I like it. I like it. I can't wait to see how this is applied in the game. So, yeah, again, I said this months ago. I made a video talking about this. I made a specific video talking about not negative, afflictions, I was calling them, basically status effects in the game that I think Wuthering Waves would benefit. We don't need elemental reactions, but why not have elemental afflictions or elemental negative status effects like this? Because really, for the most part, since launch, attributes haven't really, they don't feel like they do much beyond just being another form of damage. Really, it's still all about crit rate, crit damage, attack. They're just basically a fancy looking attack in regards to the VFX, aren't they? Now they're going to actually start to have something to them. We've already saw it, like I say, in the Spectro frazzle. Like, you know, we're getting dot now, we're getting debuffs, we're getting burst, we're getting AoE potentially as well, like I say, in the fusion. This is really cool. I really like the reduction in damage as well for Electro Flare. That's actually kind of cool. Obviously, Glacio as well, slowing. This will add some interesting mechanics to combat, I do believe. Guys, what do you think about this? Because I know there's some people really didn't want to see these sort of things in the game. Because, like I say, I made videos about this before, and a lot of people like, I don't want the game to go down that route. It's all about rotations. You know, it's all about your intros, outros, and just basically, it's the combat. And I know this is part of the combat, but you know what I mean? This is making attributes, elements now, a little bit more important in the game, actually giving them something separate in regards to how they work, rather than just being another form of damage. It's going to actually give them, you know, dots, debuffs, all that sort of stuff. So this is actually, I think this is really cool. I'd love to know what you think in the comment section, guys. As well, if you did enjoy the video, give it a like, and I'll see you all in the next one. Ta-ra.